5 p.m. on a rainy Friday in Manhattan. The revolving doors of the Sovereign Plaza didn't just spin. They sliced the world between the haves and the have-nots. Richard Montgomery adjusted his silk tie, glancing at the woman on his arm who was definitely not his wife. He walked in thinking he was the king of Wall Street, checking into his personal playground. He had no idea the guillotine was already sharpened, and the executioner was the woman he left at home heating up a microwave dinner. When the keycard finally turned red, Richard thought it was a technical glitch. He was wrong. It was a gavel banging down on his life. The rain in New York City has a way of washing away the grime of the sidewalks, while simultaneously highlighting the filth of the people walking on them. Richard Montgomery loved it. From the back seat of his obsidian black Mercedes S-Class, the world looked exactly how he liked it, blurry, distant, and beneath him. "Rick, are you sure about this?" The voice beside him was breathless, laced with that mixture of thrill and anxiety that Richard found intoxicating. Sasha was 24, a junior analyst at a rival firm, and possessed the kind of wide-eyed adoration that Richard's wife, Victoria, hadn't shown him in 15 years. Richard chuckled, a low, rumbling sound that vibrated against the leather interior. He patted Sasha's knee, his fingers lingering on the hem of her red dress. "Sasha, honey, relax. Victoria thinks I'm in Chicago for the Mergers and Acquisitions Conference. I have my assistant, Beatrice, posting scheduled tweets about deep dish pizza and windy weather. We are ghosting the world. I feel bad." "Sometimes," Sasha whispered, looking out at the smear of streetlights. "Don't," Richard said, his voice hardening just a fraction. "Victoria and I are essentially roommates who share a tax return. She's happy with her gardening club and her charity galas. She doesn't have the appetite for the life I live. She's rustic. You, on the other hand, belong here." The car glided to a halt in front of the Sovereign Plaza. It was the crown jewel of Manhattan hospitality. A Beaux-Arts masterpiece that took up half a city block, screaming old money and quiet power. The limestone facade was illuminated by golden uplights that made the building look like it was burning from within. Richard had chosen this place for a reason. It was exclusive, discreet, and outrageously expensive. 3 things he felt defined his very existence. The doorman, a man named Henry who looked like he had been carved out of the same granite as the building, opened the car door. "Welcome to the Sovereign, sir," Henry said, holding a massive umbrella to shield Richard from the drizzle. Richard stepped out, straightening his suit jacket, a bespoke Italian cut that cost more than Henry's car. He didn't make eye contact with the staff. He never did. "Bags," Richard barked, gesturing vaguely behind him, "and bring the car round back. I don't want it sitting out here getting spotted by some gossip columnist." Sasha stepped out, shivering slightly in the damp air. Richard wrapped an arm around her waist, guiding her toward the massive brass revolving doors. As they pushed through into the lobby, the noise of the city vanished, replaced by the scent of white tea, old leather, and money. The lobby of the Sovereign was cathedral-like, vaulted ceilings painted with frescoes, marble floors that clicked sharply under Richard's heels, and a chandelier the size of a small house hanging precariously overhead. It was busy, but a quiet kind of busy. Guests whispered. Bellops moved like ghosts. "God, it's beautiful," Sasha breathed, her eyes widening. "Top tier," Richard agreed, scanning the room. He liked being seen, but only by the right people. He spotted a few hedge fund managers he recognized near the bar and offered a subtle nod. They nodded back. He felt a surge of adrenaline. This was his RNA. He marched toward the reception desk, bypassing the line of tourists and heading straight for the VIP counter. The woman behind the desk was striking hair, pulled back in a severe bun, wearing a uniform that looked more like a Chanel suit than hotel livery. Her name tag read, Audrey. "Checking in," Richard said, sliding his platinum Amex across the marble countertop. "Montgomery. Richard Montgomery. I booked the Imperial Suite." He said it loudly enough for the couple next to them to hear. The Imperial Suite was $12,000 a night. He wanted Sasha to hear the number in the silence of the room. Audrey didn't smile. She didn't offer the standard robotic greeting. She simply picked up the card, holding it by the very edge as if it were contaminated. She looked at Richard, her eyes cool and unreadable. "Mr. Montgomery," she said. Her voice was smooth, professional, and entirely devoid of warmth. "We have been expecting you." "I should hope so. I booked it 3 weeks ago." Richard drummed his fingers on the counter. "I'll need champagne sent up. I'll need champagne sent up. Dom Perignon, 08 if you have it. And strawberries, the white ones." Audrey didn't type anything into her computer. She just stared at him for a beat too long. The silence stretched, becoming awkward. Sasha shifted her weight, clutching her purse. "Is there a problem?" Richard asked, his tone dropping an octave. He hated waiting. "No problem at all, sir," Audrey said, her fingers finally moving to the keyboard. She typed with a rapid staccato rhythm. Clack, clack, clack. "However, there has been a slight change to your reservation." Richard's face flushed. "Change? What change?" "If you downgraded me, I'll have your job. I specifically requested the Imperial because of the view of the park." "Oh, it's not a downgrade, Mr. Montgomery," Audrey said, finally looking up. A corner of her mouth twitched, almost imperceptibly. "Management has flagged your file as a diamond status guest for this evening. You've been moved to the owner's penthouse." Richard froze. The owner's penthouse wasn't listed on the website. It was the stuff of urban legend, the entire top floor, usually reserved for visiting royalty or heads of state. He looked at Sasha, a grin breaking across his face. "Did you hear that, babe? The owner's penthouse." He turned back to Audrey, his chest puffing out. "Well, I suppose that will suffice. I assume the rate remains the same. The billing has been taken care of," Audrey said cryptically. She handed him a key card. Audrey said cryptically. She handed him a key card. It wasn't the usual plastic. It was heavy, made of black metal with gold lettering. "Elevator 4. It's the only one that accesses the 50th floor." "Excellent." Richard snatched the card. He leaned in. "Make sure the champagne is there when we walk in." "It is already on ice, sir," Audrey replied. As Richard steered Sasha toward the elevators, he felt invincible. He whispered in her ear, "See? This is how the world works when you demand respect. You get the castle." Behind the desk, Audrey watched them go. She didn't turn back to her computer. Instead, she picked up the receiver of a sleek black landline phone. She dialed a single number. "He's in the elevator," she said softly. "Part 1 is complete." She hung up, and for the first time that night, she smiled. The elevator ride to the 50th floor was unnervingly fast. The heavy brass doors had slid shut with a finality that made Sasha jump. There were no buttons to press inside the car. Richard simply tapped the black metal card against a sensor, and the machine surged upward. My ears popped. Sasha giggled nervously, holding onto Richard's arm. "Rick, are you sure this is okay?" "The way that woman looked at you." "She was intimidated," Richard scoffed, checking his reflection in the mirrored walls. He smoothed his graying temples. "People like that smell power, and they freeze up. It happens all the time. Besides, the owner's penthouse, do you know who owns this place? The Sovereign Group. A faceless conglomerate based in Zurich or something. Their algorithm probably picked me out as a high-value spender." The elevator chimed a soft, melodic sound, and the doors opened directly into the suite. They stepped out, and even Richard, who prided himself on never being impressed, felt his breath hitch. The room was cavernous. Floor-to-ceiling windows spanned the entire length of the space, offering a panoramic, rain-slicked view of Central Park and the glittering skyline beyond. The floors were herringbone oak, covered in Persian rugs that looked older than the United States. A fire was already crackling in a massive limestone hearth. But it was the silence that hit them first. It was absolute. Wow, Sasha whispered, walking toward the window. Rick, look at the city. Richard dropped his briefcase on a velvet ottoman. I told you, the best. He loosened his tie, throwing it over a chair. Where's that champagne? He walked toward the wet bar, which was stocked with crystal decanters of amber liquid. In the center of the coffee table sat a silver ice bucket, but as Richard approached, he frowned. Sitting in the ice was not a bottle of Dom Perignon. It was a bottle of Riesling. A specific cheap brand of grocery store Riesling with a blue label featuring a cartoonish cat. Richard stared at it. The bottle looked like a joke sitting in the antique silver bucket. It was the exact wine Victoria drank. She loved it. She called it her guilty pleasure, and would drink a glass while watching reality TV on Tuesdays. Richard had mocked her for it 1,000 times, calling it sugar water for peasants. What the hell is this? Richard muttered, picking up the wet bottle. What's wrong? Sasha asked, turning around. They brought the wrong wine. This is swill. He slammed the bottle back into the ice. I ordered Dom. Maybe it's a welcome gift, Sasha suggested, walking over. She picked up a small card leaning against the bucket. There's a note. Richard snatched the card from her hand. It was heavy cardstock, cream-colored, with gold-embossed edges. Handwritten in elegant flowing calligraphy were 3 words. For the memories. Richard stared at the handwriting. It looked familiar. Painfully familiar. It looked exactly like the handwriting on the anniversary card Victoria had given him 2 weeks ago, the one he had thrown in the trash at his office without reading. Rick, you look pale, Sasha said, touching his arm. It's nothing, Richard snapped, shoving the card into his pocket. Just generic hotel nonsense, probably a slogan. He turned away, his heart hammering a strange rhythm against his ribs. It's a coincidence, he told himself. Victoria has generic handwriting. Millions of women write like that. He needed to regain control. Forget the wine, I'll open the scotch. He poured himself a stiff drink from a crystal decanter, not bothering to check the label. The liquid burned his throat, settling his nerves. Let's look around, he said, forcing a smile. I want to see the bedroom. They walked down a long hallway, lined with black and white photographs of New York in the 1920s. The master bedroom was at the end. It was dominated by a 4-poster bed draped in sheer white linens. On the bed, laid out perfectly, were 2 robes. One was a standard plush white hotel robe with a sovereign crest. The other was navy blue silk. Richard stopped in the doorway. He owned a navy blue silk robe. Victoria had bought it for him in Milan 3 years ago. He had left it at home. He was sure of it. He pictured it hanging on the hook in his bathroom in Greenwich. He walked over to the bed and touched the silk. It felt cold. He lifted the collar. Stitched into the fabric in small silver thread were the initials. R.A.M. Richard Arthur Montgomery. Okay, Richard said, his voice trembling slightly. This is getting weird. What is it? Sasha asked, bouncing on the mattress. This bed is amazing, Rick. The robe, Richard hissed. It's mine. It's my robe from home. Sasha looked at him, confused. Did you pack it? No, I didn't pack a robe. I packed a suit and a shaving kit. He grabbed the robe, shaking it. How the hell did this get here? Maybe your wife packed your bag, Sasha suggested, her eyes wide. Victoria. Richard laughed, but it sounded like a bark. Victoria doesn't touch my luggage. We have a housekeeper for that. And even if she did, why would she send it here? She thinks I'm in Chicago. He dropped the robe as if it were burning. He pulled out his phone. No signal. Damn it, he muttered. 0 bars. I have signal, Sasha said, holding up a phone. 5G. Richard stared at his phone. Must be the building materials. Thick walls. He paced the room. I'm calling the front desk. This is a violation of privacy. Someone from my house must be working here. That's the only explanation. The housekeeper, Maria, maybe she has a cousin who works housekeeping here. They're messing with me." He stormed over to the bedside phone and snatched up the receiver. He didn't dial. There was only one button on the phone labeled Concierge Hirsch. He pressed it. It rang once, twice. "Concierge. Arthur speaking." A deep, polished voice answered. "This is Mr. Montgomery in the penthouse," Richard snarled. "There is a personal item of mine in this room that I did not pack. A blue robe. I want to know how it got here, and I want to know now." There was a pause on the other end, a long, heavy pause. "Mr. Montgomery," Arthur said, his voice calm and terrifyingly pleasant. "The owner wanted to ensure you are as comfortable here as you are at home. Perhaps even more comfortable, considering the company you're keeping." Richard's blood ran cold. "What did you say? Is the temperature to your liking, sir? We can adjust the climate control. We know you tend to run hot when you're under pressure." "Who is this?" Richard shouted. "Put me through to the general manager." "I am the general manager, Mr. Montgomery," Arthur replied, "and I have strict instructions to see that your stay is memorable. Dinner has been reserved for you at L'Obsidienne downstairs at 8:04 p.m. The chef has prepared a special menu. We strongly suggest you attend. It would be rude to keep the host waiting." "I'm not eating at your—" The line went dead. Richard stood there, the receiver humming with a dial tone. He looked at Sasha, who was happily taking a selfie in the mirror, oblivious to the walls closing in. He was Richard Montgomery. He was a shark. But for the first time in his life, he felt like the bait. "Sasha," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Put your shoes back on." "Why? We just got here." "We're leaving. Now." He grabbed his briefcase and marched toward the door. He wasn't going to play games with disgruntled staff. He'd go to the Four Seasons. He'd sue this place into the ground later. He reached the massive double doors of the suite and grabbed the brass handle. He pulled. It didn't move. He pulled harder, rattling the heavy wood. Locked. "What are you doing?" Sasha asked, walking into the hallway. "The door stuck," Richard grunted, putting his shoulder into it. He jiggled the deadbolt. It spun freely. "It's electronic. They've locked it from the outside." He turned back to the room, panic finally piercing his arrogance. He ran to the elevator. He tapped his black card against the sensor. Nothing. The light on the panel remained red. "Rick, you're scaring me," Sasha said, her voice trembling. "We're not guests, Sasha," Richard said, staring at the red light that looked like an unblinking eye. "We're prisoners." Then, the lights in the suite flickered. The 60-inch television embedded in the wall opposite the fireplace suddenly turned on. The screen was blue for a second, and then a video feed appeared. It was a camera angle of the hotel lobby. Richard watched, frozen, as a woman walked through the revolving doors. She was wearing a trench coat and carrying a wet umbrella. She moved with a grace and confidence that Richard had never associated with her before. The woman stopped at the front desk. The receptionist, Audrey, bowed her head. Actually bowed and handed her a key. The woman turned toward the camera, looking directly into the lens, almost as if she could see Richard watching her 50 floors up. It was Victoria. But it wasn't the Victoria who wore sweatpants and gardened. Her hair was blown out sleek and straight. Her makeup was sharp. She looked dangerous. "Victoria?" Sasha asked, looking at the screen. Is that your wife?" On the screen, Victoria didn't speak. She just raised 2 fingers to her lips, blew a kiss at the camera, and walked toward the elevator. Richard checked his watch. The elevator took exactly 45 seconds to reach the penthouse. He had 45 seconds to come up with the lie of his life. 45 seconds is a lifetime when you are watching your executioner approach. Richard Montgomery, a man who traded millions in milliseconds, found himself paralyzed. His brain, usually a supercomputer of contingencies and alibis, had crashed. He looked at Sasha. She was standing by the window, confused, holding her phone up, trying to find a signal that didn't exist. She looked young, painfully, stupidly young. "Sasha, listen to me." Richard hissed, grabbing her shoulders. His grip was too tight. When she walks in here, you are my assistant. You are my executive assistant. We are prepping for a merger. Do not say a word about us. Do not say a word about us. Do not say a word about the hotel. But your robe is on the bed, Sasha whispered, her eyes wide with panic. And there's only one bed. I sleep on the couch. We're working late. Just shut up and play along. Ding. The sound was soft, polite, and terrifying. The brushed steel doors of the private elevator slid open. Richard spun around, pasting a smile on his face that felt like it was made of cracking plaster. He opened his arms wide. Victoria, darling, what a surprise I was just. He stopped. The woman who stepped out of the elevator was not the Victoria he knew. The Victoria he knew wore cardigans. She smelled like lavender laundry detergent and potting soil. She apologized when she bumped into furniture. She asked him if he wanted tea in a voice that always sounded slightly unsure of itself. This woman was an apex predator. She wore a trench coat made of charcoal wool that was cinched tight at the waist, revealing a silhouette Richard hadn't noticed in a decade. Her shoes were black stilettos with red soles Louboutins that clicked against the marble foyer with the rhythm of a ticking clock. Her hair, usually pulled back in a messy clip, was cascading over her shoulders in perfect, glossy waves. But it was her eyes. They were dry. There was no redness, no puffiness, no trace of the tears of a betrayed wife. They were cold, clear, and amused. "Hello, Richard," she said. Her voice wasn't shrill. It was lower than usual, vibrating with a calm authority that made the hair on Richard's arms stand up. She walked right past him. She didn't hug him. She didn't slap him. She moved through the space as if she owned the very air he was breathing. "Victoria, I can explain," Richard stammered, pivoting to follow her. "I know this looks odd. Being in New York when I said Chicago. But the conference was moved last minute and I brought Sasha, my new junior associate, to help prep the pitch deck. We were just..." Victoria stopped at the wet bar. She picked up the bottle of cheap Blue Cat Riesling from the silver bucket. She examined the label with a faint smile. "Sasha," Victoria said, not turning around. "You're 24. You graduated from NYU with a degree in marketing. You enjoy spicy margaritas, spin classes, and men who are old enough to be your father because you have unresolved issues with your own dad, who left when you were 7. Is that about right?" Sasha gasped, backing up against the window. How do you know that?" Victoria turned. She popped the cork of the Riesling with a single, practiced twist of her wrist. She didn't spill a drop. "I know that because I paid a private investigator who has been following you for 3 months, Victoria said casually, pouring the wine into a crystal flute. "And I know that because I read your text messages. He's so rich, love. I think he's going to buy me a Cartier bracelet." Was that the text from Tuesday? Sasha turned beet red. She looked at Richard for help, but Richard was staring at his wife as if she had grown a second head. "You had me followed?" Richard roared, his indignation finally overriding his fear. "You invaded my privacy? This is grounds for divorce, Victoria. I can sue you for harassment." Victoria took a sip of the wine. She grimaced slightly. "Still a bit too sweet, but it has a certain nostalgia." She set the glass down and looked Richard dead in the eye. "Grounds for divorce? Richard, darling, we passed grounds about 6 affairs ago. This isn't a marriage counseling session. This is a liquidation. You think you can intimidate me?" Richard stepped forward, puffing his chest out. He was used to dominating rooms. "I am the primary earner in this family. I built Montgomery Asset Management from nothing. You write checks for the botanical garden. You don't know the first thing about power." Victoria laughed. It was a dark, throaty sound. She walked over to the fireplace, running a finger along the mantel. "Montgomery Asset Management," she mused. "You had a good Q3. Although your exposure to the Asian tech markets is a bit risky, and you're leveraged almost 40% on that new acquisition in Jersey. It's a house of cards, Rick, but you always did like to gamble." "How do you know my leverage ratios?" Richard demanded. sweat beading on his forehead. Because I own the bank that holds your loans, Victoria said simply. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bone. Richard blinked. What? The Sovereign Group, Victoria said, gesturing around the room. You thought it was a Swiss conglomerate. It is. A holding company. But do you know who the majority shareholder is? She reached into her trenchcoat pocket and pulled out a business card. She flicked it toward him. It fluttered through the air and landed at his feet. Richard looked down. It was black with gold lettering, just like the key card. Victoria A. Blackwood, chairwoman of the board. The Sovereign Group. Blackwood, Richard whispered. That was your grandmother's maiden name. She was a school teacher. She was a Blackwood, Victoria corrected. The Steel Blackwoods, Pennsylvania Rail, real estate. She was very private. She hated flashiness. She taught me to be the same. When we met, you were so busy bragging about your lease on a Porsche that you never bothered to ask about my family trust. You assumed I was a nobody because I didn't wear logos. She took a step closer to him. I bought this hotel 6 months ago, Richard. I bought it because I knew you liked it. I knew it was your hunting ground. I wanted to see if you would bring her here. She glanced at Sasha, who was now crying silently. And you did. You are so wonderfully predictable. So what is this? Richard snarled, trying to regain his footing. You trapped me here to brag, to show me you have money. Fine, you're rich. Congratulations. I'm leaving. Come on, Sasha. He grabbed Sasha's arm and dragged her toward the elevator. He slapped his card against the sensor. The light stayed red. Unlock the elevator, Victoria, Richard warned. I can't, she said, feigning innocence. The system is automated. It seems the hotel has gone into a security lockdown. A VIP protocol. No one leaves the penthouse until the general manager clears it. Then call the general manager, clears it. Then call the general manager. I don't have to call in, Victoria said, checking her watch. He's waiting for us downstairs. We have a reservation. Dinner at L'Obsidienne, 8 p.m. And Richard. She smiled, a shark baring its teeth. You're going to want to hear what he has to say, because at 9 p.m. the SEC is scheduled to raid your office. Richard felt his knees give out. He slumped against the elevator doors. The SEC. Shall we? Victoria pressed the call button. The doors opened instantly for her. I'm starving. Liquidating a husband builds quite an appetite. The ride down to the basement level was silent, save for Sasha's muffled sobbing. Richard stood in the corner of the elevator, his mind racing. The SEC. How? Why? I've been careful. I hid the losses in the shell companies. No one knows about the Cayman accounts unless someone gave them the ledger. He looked at the back of Victoria's head. She was humming. A soft, pleasant tune. The Rite of Spring. The elevator didn't stop at the lobby. It descended past the ground floor, past the parking garage, deep into the bedrock of Manhattan. The doors opened to L'Obsidienne. It wasn't a restaurant, it was a sanctuary of shadows. The walls were rough-hewn black volcanic rock. The floor was black glass. The only light came from candles floating in bowls of water on the tables. It was empty. The entire restaurant had been cleared. Standing at the host-stand was Arthur. The voice from the phone. He was a tall man in his 50s with silver hair and a tuxedo that fit him like armor. Mrs. Montgomery, Arthur said, bowing deeply. Welcome home. Thank you, Arthur said, bowing deeply. Welcome home. Thank you, Arthur, Victoria said warmly, touching his arm. Is the table ready? Table 1. The center, Arthur replied. He glanced at Richard. His expression shifted from warmth to something resembling the way one looks at a cockroach. And Mr. Montgomery, I see you decided to join us. I want a lawyer, Richard spat. We have a lovely Pinot Noir, Arthur replied dryly. Right this way. They were led to a round table in the absolute center of the room. There were 3 chairs. Victoria took the one facing the entrance. Richard and Sasha were seated opposite her, like children called to the principal's office. Waiters emerged from the shadows. They moved in perfect synchronization, placing napkins, pouring water, and filling wine glasses. "This place," Richard muttered, looking around. "I've tried to get a reservation here for 5 years. They told me there was a waiting list until 2028. "There is no waiting list," Victoria said, unfolding her napkin. "It's invite only. And you were never invited." "Why are we here, Victoria?" Richard slammed his hand on the table. The cutlery rattled. "Cut the theatrics. If you want a divorce, fine. You take the house, I take the business. We split the liquid assets. That's the law." "The law," Victoria mused. "Arthur, bring the first course." Arthur approached with a silver platter. He placed a single envelope in front of Richard. It wasn't food. It was a thick legal document bound in blue paper. "What is this?" "The prenuptial agreement," Victoria said. "Do you remember signing it?" "Of course I do. My lawyers drafted it. It protects my assets from you." "Did you read the amendments on the last page?" "The ones my father insisted on." Richard frowned. He remembered skimming it. He was 28, arrogant, and just wanted to marry the nice girl with the small trust fund so he could look settled to his investors. Clause 14, Section B, Victoria recited from memory. "In the event of proven infidelity, resulting in public scandal or reputational damage to the partner, all joint assets and all assets acquired during the marriage revert to the injured party." "That's standard boilerplate," Richard scoffed. "And besides, proven infidelity. Good luck. It's my word against yours." Victoria nodded to the wall behind Richard. The black volcanic rock wall suddenly illuminated. It was a screen. A video started playing. It was high definition. It showed Richard and Sasha in the hotel room 20 minutes ago. The audio was crystal clear. "Victoria and I are essentially roommates. She's rustic. You get the castle." Then the video cut. It showed Richard in his office 3 weeks ago with his secretary. Not Sasha, a different woman. Then it showed Richard in Miami 6 months ago with 2 women on a boat. Richard's face drained of blood. You bugged my office? You bugged my life?" "I own the building your office is in, Richard," Victoria said, taking a sip of wine. "I bought the leasing company last year. We upgraded the security system. You approved the budget yourself. The cameras are 4K, very crisp." Sasha was staring at the screen, horrified. "Rick, who is the blonde in Miami?" "You said you were at a spiritual retreat." "Shut up, Sasha," Richard screamed. He looked at Victoria. "This is illegal surveillance. It's inadmissible in court." "I'm not taking you to court, Richard," Victoria said calmly. "I'm taking you to the cleaners. Arthur, the main course." Arthur returned. He placed a laptop on the table in front of Victoria. She turned it around so Richard could see the screen. It was a dashboard of a bank account. Montgomery Asset Management. Operating account. The balance was $14,000–12,000. "That's my operational cash flow," Richard said, his voice trembling. "What are you doing?" "You have a loan calling in," Victoria said. "The sovereign bank loan. The one you used to leverage the Jersey deal. It has a bad boy clause. If the principal owner engages in conduct that threatens the security of the collateral, the bank can call the loan immediately." "I didn't threaten the collateral." "The collateral is your reputation, Richard, and considering I just uploaded that video of you and Sasha to a private server accessible by your board of directors." She tapped a key. On the screen, the balance began to drop. $14,200,000, $10,000, $10,000, $10,000, $5,000, $5,000, $10,000, $4,000. "You're bankrupting the company," Richard screamed, standing up. "You're crazy. That's my legacy." "It's my money," Victoria corrected. "I funded your seed round, Richard, through a shell company called VAB Ventures." The AB, Victoria Ann Blackwood. You never even asked who the angel investor was. You just took the check. She closed the laptop. The money is gone, Richard. The house in Greenwich, it's in my name. The cars? Leased through my bank. The boat? Repossessed as of... She checked her watch. 10 minutes ago. She looked at Sasha. 10 minutes ago. She looked at Sasha. Sasha, honey, Victoria said, her voice softening. You have a choice. You can stay with him. He is currently negative $4 million in debt, has no car, no home, and is about to be indicted for securities. Fraud. Oh yes, I found the cooked books, Richard. I sent them to the SEC this morning. Victoria reached into her purse and pulled out a plane ticket. Or, she continued, sliding the ticket across the black glass table, you can take this, first class to Paris. I have a friend there who runs a fashion PR firm. She needs an intern. It pays well, but you have to leave now, and you have to sign a statement confirming everything you saw tonight. Sasha looked at Richard. He was a sweating, red-faced mess, muttering about lawyers and lawsuits. He looked old. He looked pathetic. Then she looked at Victoria, the queen in her castle. Sasha reached out and took the ticket. Sasha, Richard gasped. You can't leave me. We love each other. Sasha stood up. She wiped her eyes. Actually, Rick, I really hate Riesling. And you snore. She walked away, her heels clicking on the glass floor, disappearing into the shadows toward the exit. Richard was alone. Sit down, Richard, Victoria commanded. He sat. He had no strength left to stand. What do you want? He whispered. You've taken everything. What more do you want? He whispered. I don't want anything from you, Victoria said. I just want you to understand something. You spent 15 years thinking you were the smart one. You thought I was boring. You thought I was safe. You mistook my silence for ignorance. That was your fatal error. She stood up. She smoothed her trench coat. The meal is paid for. The room upstairs is paid for until tomorrow morning. After that, Henry the doorman has instructions to remove you from the premises. If you return, you will be arrested for trespassing. Where will I go? Richard asked, his voice cracking. He sounded like a child. I hear the shelter on 34th Street has vacancies, Victoria said. Or maybe you can call one of your other associates. See if they're as loyal as Sasha. She turned to leave. Victoria, wait. Richard scrambled up. Please, I'm sorry. I'll change. We can fix this. I love you. Victoria stopped. She didn't turn around. She just paused, silhouetted against the dark rock walls. You don't love me, Richard. You loved the mirror I held up for you, but I dropped the mirror. And you're just looking at the broken glass. She walked out of the restaurant, flanked by Arthur. Richard sat back down in the dark. The candle on the table flickered and went out. The silence in El Obsidienne was different now. It wasn't the silence of luxury. It was the silence of luxury. It was the silence of a tomb. Richard sat in the dark for what felt like hours. He poured himself another glass of the expensive wine Victoria had left behind, but it tasted like vinegar. He pulled out his phone. 14 missed calls from his CFO. 3 missed calls from the chairman of the board. 1 text from his mother, Rick. Why are reporters calling the house? He opened his banking app. Access denied. Please contact your branch. He tried his credit card app. Account closed. He was a ghost. In the span of 2 hours, he had been erased. He stood up, his legs shaky. He needed to get out of here. He needed to find a lawyer who would work on contingency. He needed to spin this. He walked to the elevator. He pressed the button for the lobby. When the doors opened, the lobby was bustling. It was Friday night. Guests were laughing, drinking, living their lives. Richard stepped out, looking disheveled. His tie was loose, his hair wild. He walked toward the front door, head down, hoping no one would recognize him. Mr. Montgomery? He froze. It was Audrey, the receptionist. She was standing with two large men in dark suits. They weren't hotel security. They were police officers. "Yes," Richard croaked. "These gentlemen would like a word with you," Audrey said, her face completely blank. One of the officers stepped forward. "Richard Montgomery." "Yes. We have a warrant for your arrest regarding allegations of embezzlement and securities fraud related to Montgomery Asset Management. Please turn around and place your hands behind your back." No, there's a mistake." Richard backed away, bumping into a bellhop cart. "My wife? She's setting me up. She owns this place. She manipulated the data." "Sir, the evidence was submitted by your own CFO about an hour ago," the officer said, pulling out handcuffs. "Stop resisting." The lobby went quiet. Tourists stared. Phones came out, recording the spectacle. As Richard was spun around and the cold metal clicked onto his wrists, he looked up. On the balcony of the mezzanine level, overlooking the lobby, stood a figure. It was Victoria. She was holding a cup of tea. She watched him being manhandled by the police with the same detached interest one might have while watching a documentary about ants. She raised her teacup in a small, silent toast. Richard screamed her name as they dragged him out the revolving doors into the rainy New York night. The next morning, the sun broke over Manhattan. Crisp and clear, Victoria sat in the owner's penthouse, the real one, on the 52nd floor, a floor Richard didn't even know existed. She was wearing a silk robe, her own. She was eating strawberries, the white ones. Arthur stood by the desk. "The press release has gone out, madam," Arthur said. "Stock in the Sovereign Group is up 4% this morning, following the news of our ethical restructuring of the acquired assets." "Excellent," Victoria said. "And Mr. Montgomery?" "Arraigned this morning. Bail denied. It seems he is considered a flight risk, given his hidden accounts in the Caymans were exposed." "Good." Victoria took a bite of a strawberry. "Arthur, send a gift basket to the district attorney's office. Muffins, no nuts. Consider it done." Victoria stood up and walked to the window. She looked down at the city. It was her city. It always had been. She had just let Richard borrow it for a while. "Arthur." "Yes, madam?" "Have housekeeping burn the sheets in the guest penthouse. And the blue robe. Burn that too. Already in the incinerator, madam." Victoria smiled. "Already in the incinerator, madam." Victoria smiled. She felt lighter than she had in 20 years. But the story wasn't quite over, because in the world of the ultra-wealthy, no one goes down without trying to drag someone else with them. Her phone buzzed. An unknown number. She picked it up. "Hello? You think you won, Vic?" The voice was scratchy, desperate, and calling from a payphone at Rikers Island. "Hello, Richard?" she sighed. "You get one phone call. You're using it to annoy me." "I didn't just cook the books for my company," Richard laughed. A manic, broken sound. "I handled the tax returns for your family trust for the last 5 years, remember? You signed the power of attorney. If I go down, the Blackwood Trust goes down with me. I hid dirty money in your foundation, Victoria. You're not the queen. You're my accomplice." Victoria froze. The strawberry in her hand dropped to the floor. The line went dead. The phone in Victoria's hand felt like a live grenade. The dial tone hummed, a monotonous drone that seemed to mock the silence of the penthouse. "Accomplice." The word bounced around the marble walls. Victoria slowly lowered the phone to the receiver. Her hand didn't shake, but her knuckles were white. She looked at Arthur, who was still standing by the door, his posture rigid. "Arthur," she said, her voice dropping to a register that was dangerously quiet. "Get the car. And call Harrison. Tell him to meet us at the vault. Now." "The vault, madam?" Arthur blinked, a rare crack in his composure. "It's Saturday. The private archives are closed." "Open them," Victoria commanded, turning on her heel and marching toward the bedroom to change. "Richard thinks he planted a bomb in the foundation of my life." I need to see if the fuse is lit. 40 minutes later, the black Maybach was tearing through the streets of Lower Manhattan, ignoring speed limits. Victoria sat in the back, typing furiously on her encrypted tablet. She was accessing the deep-level ledgers of the Blackwood Family Trust. Richard had been her husband, yes, but he had also been a brilliant accountant before greed ate his brain. She had given him power of attorney 5 years ago when her mother fell ill, allowing him to manage the charitable overflow, the tax-exempt donations that moved between the foundation and various offshore holding companies. It was boring, administrative work, or so she had thought. The car screeched to a halt in front of a nondescript brutalist building on Wall Street, the physical archive of the Sovereign Bank. Waiting by the steel doors was Harrison Ford, no relation to the actor, though he carried himself with a similar weary ruggedness. He was the Blackwood family's chief legal counsel, a man who cost $2,000 an hour and was worth every penny. "Victoria," Harrison said, opening her door. He looked grim. "I got your message. I pulled the logs for the trust's sub-accounts. And?" Victoria asked, stepping out into the cold wind. "We need to go inside," Harrison said, guiding her toward the biometric scanner. They descended 3 floors underground into a climate-controlled room filled with rows of servers and physical file cabinets. Harrison led her to a glass-walled conference room where piles of documents were already spread out. "Richard wasn't lying," Harrison said, tossing a file onto the table. "Look at this." Victoria picked up the document. It was a transfer authorization form dated 18 months ago. It moved $12 million from a shell company in Panama into the Blackwood Botanical Preservation Fund. "That's a donation," Victoria said, squinting at the fine print. "What's the problem?" "The problem is where the money came from," Harrison explained, tapping a diagram he had drawn on a whiteboard. "The Panama Shell Company is linked to the Verrocchio construction firm in New Jersey." Victoria felt a chill. "Verrocchio? The mob outfit?" "Alleged mob outfit," Harrison corrected. "But yes, Richard was washing their money. He was taking dirty cash from their racketeering operations, funneling it through the Panama Shell, and donating it to your charity to clean it. Then he would withdraw the money from the charity as consulting fees paid to his firm, Montgomery Asset Management." Victoria sank into a chair. "He used my family's legacy as a laundromat for the mafia." "It gets worse," Harrison said, his voice grave, "because you are the signatory on the trust, and because he used your digital signature stamp, which you authorized him to use. It looks like you signed off on every single transfer." "He framed me," Victoria whispered. "He set this up years ago, a fail-safe. If the feds see this," Harrison said, loosening his tie, "they won't just seize his assets, they'll freeze the entire Blackwood estate. They'll freeze the entire Blackwood estate, the hotel, the bank, the portfolio, everything. You could be looking at 20 years for RICO violations. Money laundering at this scale carries a mandatory minimum." Victoria closed her eyes. She pictured Richard in his cell, laughing. He knew. He knew that if he went down, he had a nuclear option to take the Queen with him. It was a brilliant, hateful move. "How long do we have?" Victoria asked. "The SEC raid on his office was yesterday," Harrison calculated. "They'll be going through his digital files now. They'll find the link to the Verrocchio accounts within 48 hours. Once they connect it to the Blackwood Trust, maybe Monday morning. We have 2 days. 2 days to disprove a paper trail that I authorized," Victoria murmured. She stood up and walked to the wall of servers. The humming sound reminded her of the bees in her garden. Hard-working, relentless. "Harrison," she said softly, "do you remember 3 years ago, when I had that audit done? The private one?" "Yes," Harrison nodded. "We were looking for tax inefficiencies." "No." Victoria turned around. Her eyes were hard as diamonds. "I told you that's what we were looking for. But I was looking for something else. I had noticed discrepancies in our joint checking account. Small things. Hotel charges in cities where he had no business. Jewelry purchases I never received." "You knew about the affairs back then?" Harrison asked, surprised. "I suspected." But I didn't want to divorce him yet. I wanted to see how far he would go. So I went to see a man named Agent Miller. Harrison's eyebrows shot up. Miller? The FBI forensic accountant? The very same, Victoria said. I went to him off the record. I told him I suspected my husband was moving money dangerously. I told him I wanted to protect the trust. And what did Miller say? He told me that if I revoked Richard's access, Richard would know I was onto him and he would cover his tracks. Miller wanted to catch the people Richard was working with. The Verrocchio family. Victoria walked back to the table and placed her hands flat on the mahogany. So, Agent Miller and I built a sandbox. Harrison stared at her. A what? A mirror, Victoria said, a small, dangerous smile playing on her lips. We cloned the Blackwood Trust's banking interface. We created a dummy system, real account numbers, but isolated from the actual assets. When Richard logged in for the last 3 years, he wasn't accessing the real trust. He was playing in a simulation monitored by the FBI. Harrison's jaw dropped. You let him launder money for the mob inside a honeypot. I didn't let him launder anything, Victoria corrected. The money never actually moved. The FBI intercepted the incoming wire transfers, held them in an escrow evidence account, and then generated a fake confirmation for Richard's screen. He thought he was washing money. In reality, he was just wiring evidence directly to the federal government. Jesus, Victoria, Harrison breathed, running a hand through his hair. That's diabolical. It's thorough, Victoria said. Does Agent Miller have the files ready? If this is true, Miller has been waiting for Richard to snap the trap shut, Harrison said, a grin slowly spreading across his face. Get the car, Arthur, Victoria said, grabbing her coat. We're going to Rikers Island. I think it's time I told my husband about the glitch in the system. Rikers Island smelled of industrial bleach and despair. In the VIP visitation room, Richard sat behind the reinforced glass, wearing a drab grey jumpsuit that washed out his complexion. He looked wrecked, but when he saw Victoria, a desperate, malicious spark lit his eyes. He picked up the phone receiver, leaning in close. I knew you'd come, Richard rasped, his voice trembling with manic energy. You checked the logs, didn't you? The $40 million I laundered for the Verrocchio crime family through your botanical foundation. Your digital signature is on every transfer, Vic. If I sink, I'm dragging the Blackwood Trust down with me. It's mutually assured destruction. Victoria sat calmly, her posture perfect. She didn't look scared. She looked bored. She reached into her bag and pressed a single sheet of paper against the glass. Subject: Operation. Glasshouse status: active surveillance, 36 months. Richard squinted at the Department of Justice letterhead. What is this? You think you were playing the system, Richard, but you were just playing a video game, Victoria said, cold as ice. 3 years ago, when I first suspected you, I went to the FBI. We cloned the trust's banking interface. The system you used to launder that money was a simulation. A honeypot. Richard's face went slack. No, I saw the confirmations. Screen pixels, Victoria corrected. The money never moved to Panama. It went directly into a DOJ holding account. You didn't launder a cent. You just handed the federal government a complete list of every mob associate you work with. You aren't an accomplice, Richard. You are an informant. An unwitting informant. Richard began to shake violently. If the Verrocchio family finds out I gave their money to the feds. The indictments were unsealed this morning, Victoria said mercilessly. The mob boss knows everything. The mob boss knows everything, and since you didn't cooperate voluntarily, you don't qualify for witness protection. You're just a snitch sitting in general population. Richard dropped the phone, screaming silently behind the glass, begging, slamming his fist against the partition. Victoria stood up and signaled the guard. She didn't look back. She walked out into the blinding sunlight where her black Maybach waited. Her phone buzzed a text from Sasha, landed in Paris. Thank you. Victoria smiled, settling into the leather seat. Home, Arthur. I have a hotel to run. The Queen was safe on her throne. The rat was in the trap. And the game was finally over. So the next time you walk into a five-star hotel and see a quiet woman in the corner sipping tea, don't assume she's just a guest. She might be the one signing the checks, owning the building and holding the keys to your destruction. Richard Montgomery learned the hard way that when you play games with the sovereign, you don't just lose your money, you lose the game. Would you have forgiven Richard, or was Victoria's revenge the perfect justice? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of betrayal and sweet revenge, please hit that like button, share this with a friend who loves drama, and don't forget to subscribe for more intense stories every week. Thanks for watching.
How many steps do I take per day? About 20K steps a day. Sometimes even more. Depends on how busy my day actually gets. But on a regular day, would not doing like extra stuff would be like around 20K steps. Hey Dale, thank you so much for the super chat. Appreciate the donation, Dale. Thank you so much once again, man. Appreciate it. Sean is saying that's crazy, I know. Hey, the Millis all the way from Lower East Side is saying thanks for the tours. Great not to have to do all the walking in the cold. I know. Hey, the Mellis, thank you so much for the super chat. Appreciate the